now live.
Thank you so very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Before we begin the public hearing, I will make the following announcement. Due to the continuing threat to public health from COVID-19, City Council committees are currently meeting remotely. We're using Microsoft Teams to make these remote hearings possible. Instructions for how the public may view and offer testimony at public hearings of City Council committees are included in the public hearing notices that are published in the Daily News, Inquirer, and Legal Intelligencer prior to hearings, and can also be found on phlcouncil.com. I now note that the hour has come. Before I ask Rachel to call the roll for those viewing this hearing on Channel 64, I want you to be aware that we will be immediately recessing this hearing to 3 p.m. today so that we may attend the swearing in ceremony for our newest colleague, Michael Driscoll. This means that we will not hear any testimony until the 3 o'clock hour. So please tune back in at 3 p.m. if you'd like to watch this hearing. I want to thank you all so very much for your understanding. Rachel, will you please call the roll to take attendance? Members that are in attendance, will you please indicate that you are present when your name is called? Also, please say a few brief words when responding so that your image will be displayed on screen when you speak. Rachel, please proceed.
We have Vice Chair Brian O'Neill.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Councilmember Alan Dom.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and colleagues. I'm present.
And Councilmember Catherine Gilmer Richardson.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and colleagues. I am present.
Thank you all so very much. A quorum of the committee is present. This hearing is called to order, and we will now go into a public meeting to recess the public hearing and meeting until 3 p.m. This afternoon. With that being shared, this is the public meeting to recess our public hearing and meeting. And with that in mind, the chair recognizes Councilmember O'Neill for a motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that the public hearing and public meeting on bill numbers 220487, 220493, and 220526 be recessed until 3 p.m. this afternoon.
Second.
The chair notes for the record that Councilmember Dom seconds the motion. It has been moved and properly seconded that the public hearing and public meeting on bill numbers 220487, 220493, and 220526 be recessed until 3 p.m. this afternoon. All those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? The ayes have it. The motion carries. And the public hearing and public meeting on bill numbers 220487, 220493, and 220526 stands in recess until 3 p.m. this afternoon. Thank you all again so much for your patience, and we'll see you shortly.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, council members, and participants, we are now live.
afternoon, everyone. We will now reconvene the public hearing of the Committee on Labor and Civil Service. Rachel, will you please call the roll to take attendance? Members that are in attendance will please indicate that you are present when your name is called. Also, please say a few brief words when responding. Speak.
Councilmember Alan Dom,
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. I am present.
Councilmember Derek Green,
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. I am present.
Councilmember Catherine Gilmore Richardson,
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. I am present.
and we also are joined by Councilmember Kenyatta Johnson, who is not a member of the committee, but whose bill is being heard here today.
Rachel, does that wholly contain our quorum?
Yes, we have 4 members of the committee on, which makes it four.
Okay. Thank you so very much. A quorum of the committee is present, and this hearing is called back to order. This is a public hearing of the Committee on Labor and Civil Service on bill numbers 220487, 220526, and 220493. Rachel, will you please read the title of the bills?
220487, an ordinance amending Title 22 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Public Employees Retirement Code by modifying the circumstances when City of Philadelphia retirees continue to receive retirement benefits following reemployment, providing for other related benefit requirements, and making certain technical changes, and amending Chapter 20-900 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Health and Welfare Benefits for Pensioned Employees by modifying the circumstances when City of Philadelphia retirees who are reemployed must contribute to their health and welfare benefits and to any applicable union, all under certain terms and conditions. 220526, an ordinance amending Chapter 9-2300 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Protection of Displaced Contract Workers to extend protections for displaced contract workers to airport service employees and parking workers employed through service contracts or subcontracts to perform work within the City of Philadelphia. And 220493, an ordinance amending subsection 11, leases and subleases of section 17-107 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Contractors, Labor Management Relationships to provide that any city airport operating agreement or regulations of the city concerning rates and charges for the use of airport gates and other facilities shall be deemed to incorporate the prevailing wage requirements applicable to city leases, covered airport service contracts, and covered airport service employees, and making other changes concerning covered airport service employees, all under certain terms and conditions.
Thank you so very much. Before we begin to hear testimony from the witnesses we have for today, everyone who has been invited to the meeting to testify should be aware that this public hearing is being recorded. Because the hearing is public, participants and viewers have no reasonable expectation of privacy. By continuing to be in the meeting, you are consenting to being recorded. Additionally, prior to recognizing members for the questions or comments they have for witnesses, I will note for the record at this time that we will use the chat feature available in Microsoft Teams to allow members to signify that they wish to be recognized. In order to comply with the Sunshine Act, the chat feature must only be used for this purpose. Now, before I have Rachel to call the first panel for comments on bill number 220487, I want to make some comments on this legislation for which I am the sponsor. When we unveiled the Neighborhood Safety and Community Policing Plan on March the 30th, and this is reflective of comments made when this bill was originally introduced in council, one of the things I noted for the record was that the people of Philadelphia did not want those of us elected to public office to simply be expert articulators of the problems facing our city. Instead, what I affirmed at that time is what I wholeheartedly believe, and that is that the people from all walks of life in neighborhoods across our city, they want us to proffer solutions with a sense of urgency in efforts to ensure that the overall public health and public safety of our city is, in fact, our number one priority. I also, at that time, noted that as it related to the vacancies available in our city, that the fire department was short 700 positions of its full complement that included paramedics, firefighters, and EMTs. The police, and we had learned this during their callbacks during our budget hearings, they were 522 positions short of their allowable full complement of sworn officers, and our Commissioner Outlaw affirmed for the record that the only challenge that was standing in the way of implementing at scale that proactive community policing, that is bike patrol and beat officers in all neighborhoods across the city, not those who are there deployed in efforts to respond to crime, but building and strengthening community police relationships in neighborhoods. The only thing standing in between that was manpower. The Department of Corrections during that time, there were 633 correctional officers short, and that was impacting the department's ability to promote employees internally. And L&I, as it related to inspectors, also had a significant shortage. So when I introduced this bill, that would, in essence, allow the city to rehire retirees while allowing them to retain their monthly pension. It was an idea that would apply to all retired employees here in the city of Philadelphia. When this bill was introduced, I also noted for the record that while I had not at that time, that I would communicate with the leadership of all of the municipal unions representing employees here in the city of Philadelphia. And that in order for this legislation, as it was written, to be implemented, our mayor would have to declare that an extraordinary circumstance exists that threatens the public health, safety, and welfare of the city, and identify specific departments and types of employees that needed to be rehired without having their pension benefits suspended. And then City Council would, in essence, have to approve that such a declaration was necessary via resolution. The retirees in this legislation could be reemployed for up to 3 years. They would earn the paycheck while still receiving their monthly pension. And at the same time, they would not have to pay into our pension fund. They would also not earn additional service credit under the pension plan. We were extremely sensitive to the fiscal stability of our pension fund. The bill also amended the health and welfare benefits for pension employees to clarify that any rehired retiree would have to make contributions to the applicable health and welfare fund and pay union dues during their period of rehiring. Why was this significant, Sherelle? Because I am a firm believer that the men and women who are a part of the unions representing workers in the city of Philadelphia have a right for anyone who is employed by our city to be contributors to our local unions. I talked already about the departments and the challenges they were facing with hiring and retention and all of the vacancies that were only exacerbated by COVID-19, the civil unrest, and this period that's often referred to as the Great resignation. For the benefit of the viewing public who may not know this, I also want you to know that many of these city positions have extensive training and onboarding requirements. And so that sense of urgency that you heard me reference about the now, the ability to bring these retirees back immediately to assist us in this crisis, you may not know what that's like, but for the police academy, they have a 9-month-long process, and there is 6+ months long training for L&I inspectors. And you've heard me note that we didn't have the luxury of time to recruit and or train all the new employees in order to fill the vacancies. With that being said, I did everything that I said I would do. I met with all of our union leadership. Many of them gave recommendations for amendments that we had since forwarded over to the city's law department. Some in particular, District Council 33, registering its opposition to the legislation, sent a letter to me that will be a part of the public record for this hearing, along with an additional letter that was sent to members of City Council registering their opposition to the legislation. However, and I am pleased to note this today for the record, that when communicating with the law department about this legislation, and particularly as it related to many of the amendments that we wanted to have inserted and offered here today, they informed us that legislation from City Council could actually more complicate implementing this issue from a legal perspective. And of course, we asked why. And they said because of the separation of powers, the labor laws, and the pension laws. And while we were reading this response and communicating with our law department, it reminded me of the conversation that we recently had around the residency requirement. You all will know that the City Council of Philadelphia reestablished residency that had been in place for like up to 50 years, up until 2008. But we repeatedly talked about the Home Rule Charter allowing the Civil Service Commission to waive the residency requirement at the request of our personnel director when there aren't qualified Philadelphia residents available to fill these vacant positions. I am pleased to note, while it did take some time, this was not exercised, but it eventually was in April of 2022. And that was when our mayor, our administration waived the residency requirement for police and correctional officers. And as the law department affirmed, as we affirmed, there was no legislation needed to employ the use of that waiver. It is with this in mind today that we will continue to hear the testimony on this bill about the need for using the tool of being able to rehire retirees here in the city of Philadelphia as a tool to address the crisis we have right now. But as per the law department, the city of Philadelphia has the ability to do this now. So we will hear again for those who have testimony in the affirmative and or against that you have submitted in writing. All of that will be a part of the public record, but we will also get the benefit of those who are present today, because we will continue to advocate for the rehiring of retirees here in the city of Philadelphia to address the now. Let me say that when I introduced it, I said I didn't think this was going to be a silver bullet to solving our ongoing crisis associated with our vacancies in the city. or solving the challenges with the ongoing violence or the HR issues that we are having with even just trying to convince people to apply. This is one tool in the toolbox, City of Philadelphia, the potential rehiring of retirees who have already been part of the City of Philadelphia's workforce, and we have the ability to do that now. So with that being said, Rachel, I want you to call the first panel that we have scheduled to testify here today on bill number 220487.
Rob Dubo.
Thank you, Mr. DeBoe, for your presence. Just state your name for the record, and please feel free to proceed with your testimony.
Help if I wasn't muted. Good afternoon, Chair Parker and members of the committee. I'm Rob Dubo, the Director of Finance, and I'm here today to testify in support of Bill number 220487, which would allow the city to rehire retired employees for up to 3 years, and those employees could continue receiving their monthly pension while also earning a salary. The legislation is designed to give the city additional options for filling crucial vacancies during hiring emergencies without creating additional costs for the pension fund. The legislation provides additional options for hiring by allowing a mayor with approval from council to declare an emergency that requires bringing back retired employees. While those employees would continue to receive their pension payments, the pension fund is already incurring those costs, so the bill does not create extra costs for the pension fund, and it guarantees that by limiting participation in the program to less than 3 years. That ensures that participants' pension benefits wouldn't be recalculated, and that's what would create costs for the fund. We agree this bill could help the city address the shortage of city employees in critical roles, including in police department. Thank you for your consideration and your opportunity to testify. I'm joined by representatives of the police department and the Department of Human Resources, and we're happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you so very much, Mr. DeBoe, for your testimony. Do want to affirm what Mr. DeBoe stated, that D.C. Wimberly, C.I. Cochrane, S.I. Healy, and Val Hosendorf, hope I did not chop those names up, are here for questions. And Mr. DeBoe, again, you heard me in my opening remarks, note that after being consulted and working very closely with the law department and trying to get all of the amendments that we were attempting to work on to get implemented into this bill, and as we begin to work through them, law informed us that this was something that the city could achieve without legislation. With that being said, Mr. DeBoe, from a finance perspective and for the benefit of the public, I wanted you to just reaffirm for the public that with the vacancies that we have, even those that I referenced in my opening remarks, if in fact the city of Philadelphia employed the rehiring of retirees as a tool to get workers back on our rolls and doing the work necessary to move our city forward, you are telling us that we could do so in a manner that would not have an impact on the fiscal stability of our pension fund.
That is correct, because the way the bill is constructed, employees could stay for up to 1 day less than 3 years. And as long as they didn't stay for 3 years, their pension benefits would not be recalculated. So there would be no impact on the pension fund.
Thank you so very much. Look, I have a question, and I'm not sure who, if it would be D.C. Wembley or any of the members of the department whose names I called. You heard me during my opening remarks reference what our Commissioner Danielle Outlaw affirmed on the record when you all were before us during the budget hearings, and that was in that Philadelphia Neighborhood Safety and Community Policing Plan. One of the things that we called for was 300 neighborhood-based community policing officers, that is bike patrol and beat officers, who would have a proactive presence in neighborhoods, not there to, in essence, respond to crime the way we know it. And one of the things the commissioner responded to during that time, I asked her, was the only thing stopping you from implementing a plan? And in my mind, it was proactive. We have 10 districts. That would have been 30 community policing officers, bike on the beat in neighborhoods, would be in essence manpower. And the commissioner affirmed that. Could any of you affirm not just the need and the value of community policing, that is proactively having beat officers and bike patrol in neighborhoods that are not a part of Operation Pinpoint, that are not a part of GVI, but proactively policing in neighborhoods? Would you also affirm today that the only thing that would be standing in the way of the department doing that is manpower?
Good afternoon. I'm Robin Wemberly, Deputy Commissioner of the Office of Professional Responsibility, and that is correct. In order for us to be more visible in the community, more involved and proactive, things, we need more people. So it is definitely a manpower issue.
And would you say, DC Wemberly, if in fact the city of Philadelphia employed the use of this tool to rehire retirees, would that be, of course, an added value and or benefit to the department in our ability to proactively deploy officers in neighborhoods across the city?
Yes, we feel that would help in our efforts.
Now, one of the things that we did in preparation for the development of this bill is that we made sure that we did have conversations with city workers from across the board. I don't care if they were correctional officers, if they were in the fire department or the police department, to hear about whether or not there were retirees who would be interested in coming back. And because, I heard a lot of naysayers saying that won't be possible. The problem, the public safety problem, the gun violence problem in the city of Philadelphia is so intense that there would be no retired police officers who would be interested in coming back to be members of this department. Can any of you affirm whether or not you agree with that statement, that if we were employing the use of this tool, do you think we would not get anyone to show up?
We believe we would have some people show up, yes.
It's important for us to be able to get that on the record, because when we were questioning the number of new potential sworn officers who would be making it through the academy, and we were trying to get through that number of 300, we were trying to figure out how many from each class we could get to be assigned to community policing. With that being said, just from today or throughout 2022, based on the scheduling that we have now, the classes that we have now, the classes that we are preparing to start in the future without using this tool, how many new officers do you think that we prospectively would be bringing on?
Well, right now we have a class of 80 that's due to graduate in September.
80, and they don't finish until September.
Exactly. And when you look at our attrition numbers and retirement numbers, we're really replacing 1 for 1, or maybe 1 for 2.
No, DC Wemberly, that's extremely important. Somebody from the viewing public is listening to you and they didn't make that correlation. You just said a class now of 80 people scheduled to graduate in September, but you talked about attrition. So you're saying, explain that to us. For every new person in that class, you're telling me you could potentially have someone who is retiring or just making a decision to leave?
That's correct. People leave every day, whether it be retirement. Some resign, some they leave for other, employment opportunities. And that's a number that we can't gauge unless they're in the drop. So we'll know if they're in the drop, if they're leaving. So right now, like I said, we have 80 coming out.
And how many more classes are we expected to start before that class is finished?
We're hoping to start at least one class, one more class.
At least one more.
Yes.
One
But I
more.
don't have a number for that. I don't have a number of the amount of people.
Okay, what's the largest size of a class that we've ever had going through the academy? 80, like is 80 a large class or?
In today's time, 80 is a large class. Yeah, we've had classes of 150.
Ooh,
So
okay.
we've had larger classes before. I believe one of the classes before this 80 may have been 100 or close to 100.
Close to 100. So, I mean, in fact, again, for the benefit of the viewing public, who's listening to this, you hear about the number of folks who are in our academy right now, scheduled to come out in September. DC Wimberly just affirmed that we have another class that is coming through, but we have no way of making a determination right now as to the number that we will have in that class. And so based on these numbers, without employing the use of this tool that would allow Philadelphia to rehire retirees, there is no way I could see us getting to that proactive 300 number of having officers engaged in community police in the way that we know it on the ground. And the only barrier to that would be manpower. I just want you all to affirm it and that I'm not summarizing what you just said inaccurately. Would you affirm that that's correct, DC Wimberly?
Yes, I do.
Okay, thank you so very much. At this time, I want to, let me see if I can pull up the, okay, we have a question from Council Member Don. Chair recognizes Council Member Don.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks for this legislation. I just have a few technical questions I wanted to ask. I guess one is to Rob DeVoe, and that is if we're hiring retired people back onto whatever departments, force, whatever, fire department or prisons, is it less expensive for us to bring back retired people who are not going to be in the pension plan? They're already in the pension plan. What are the cost numbers, like comparing their costs to someone new we hire? What would the cost differential be?
Yeah, so I can you not getting into the specific dollars because that'll depend on things like salary, and I can tell you kind of the general theory, which is these employees would come back. And again, if they stayed for less than 3 years, they would not have recalculation of their pension benefits. So there'd be no additional pension cost for the pension fund. If we hire someone new, that employee will get a pension and there'll be pension costs that'll be, accrued during their time here.
So would you say, depending on the salary we bring them back at, there's a good possibility it might be less expensive to hire the retired people than new people?
Definitely be less expensive for the pension fund.
Yeah. Okay. Then the other question I have is, do we have any idea how many potential people might be interested?
I don't know that. I don't think we've gone out and started to sell this program yet because we're waiting for the bill to pass.
Right. And does anyone know, as we sit here today, and maybe Madam Chair mentioned this already, how many vacancies right now are actually in the police department as of today?
Currently, we have more than 540 vacancies.
540. And how many do we have out on desk duty or sick duty?
If you're referring to IOD?
Yeah.
I believe, I'm not sure about the number, but I believe it's around maybe 400, 500.
And is that, are we included people that are out for sick leave and also on desk duty because they can't be out in the field?
Yes.
So would you say just in general, it's about 1,000 officers are not available out of 6,400?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And thank you for this legislation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, Council Member Don. I don't see any additional questions for this panel in the chat or text messages because sometimes we can't lift our hands or even type in the chat. But hearing none, I want to thank each and every one of you for your testimony. And I don't know if DC Wimberly, if DC Wimberly or Healy or any of the officers who are on behalf of the department, are there just any overall comments that you want to register on the record about Philadelphia's potential to use the tool of hiring, rehiring retirees to help fill the vacancies that you have in the department as a tool? Any comments that you want to register on the record regarding this concept?
This is Staff Inspector Healy. Just basically, I'd like to appreciate on behalf of the department. Thank you. We're trying creative ways to fill our gaps, and we appreciate the efforts that you have put forward. So I just want to say thank you on behalf of the police commissioner.
Thank you again so very much for your testimony. With that being said, Rachel, can you please call the next panel that we have to testify on this legislation?
Yes, we have Paul Levy and Jabari Jones.
Thank you so very much. I see Paul Levy on screen. Paul, would you please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony?
Yes, my name is Paul Levy. I'm president of the Center City District, and Chair Parker and members of the committee, thank you very much for the opportunity to testify. I'm very pleased to testify in favor of Bill 220487, which will amend that portion of the Philadelphia Code so you can re-engage former retired officers. We now know you don't need to amend it, you can do it now. But extraordinary circumstances which threaten the public health, safety, and welfare of Philadelphia exist in neighborhoods across the entire city and in the downtown. Whether it is gun violence creating a climate of terror for children, parents, and teachers, rampant drug use that makes people afraid to walk or do business in some of our communities, or the neglect of low-level retail crime and quality of life challenges. Too many Philadelphians now feel the public environment is dangerous, dirty, and out of control. In those circumstances, those businesses and people who have the ability to leave will choose to depart. We lose jobs and we lose population. So public safety is the foundation for neighborhood stability and job growth. Bringing back retired officers, as you've said, Councilwoman Parker, is just one part of the equation. Step two is something I've heard you say very frequently, a renewed focus on community policing. At the core of community policing is a partnership with neighborhood and business groups in which police and public officials ask, what are the issues that make you feel unsafe? And then shaping strategies to address those challenges. We don't want or need police as warriors. We want them as guardians of a renewed community definition of public safety. That means police working in partnership with business organizations, social service, mental health, and drug and alcohol teams. This is not a choice between services and policing. We need more of both. Step three is expanding the police cadet program to a model much closer to what they're doing in Boston and Chicago to attract many more young residents into policing. That will take more time, but that's also an important step. Step four is to do the serious work on alternatives to incarceration. We need to restore the very successful community court that operated downtown for more than a decade, that sentenced people not to jail, but to drug and alcohol or mental health treatment and community sentences, performing community service back in the neighborhoods in which they committed their crimes. It's called restorative justice. We need to expand that citywide. Again, this is not an either or, but a both and choice. Better services and more community policing. As you know, in Center City, through our improvement district, we're doing many of the things. We deploy 100 sidewalk sweepers. We deploy 40 uniformed unarmed people patrolling on the street. We deploy 21 bike patrol officers who work closely in partnership with police. We focus on greening, lighting, and quality parks. But the city needs to do and provide that service in many more neighborhoods. So Councilwoman Parker, thank you very much for your leadership and for speaking out, condemning policing when it's badly practiced, but praising the thousands of officers who are committed to community policing, who work hard to keep us safe each day. And I think you're setting a model for public officials. If we want to know how to make this bill successful, it's by having more public officials step out, and speak out and praise our officers and set a climate where we know we don't want violent and irresponsible police. We want responsible, committed police who reflect what thousands of police officers are doing each day. They need to hear it. They need to be encouraged to come back. So thank you for your leadership.
Thank you so very much, Paul Levy, for your testimony. If you could just remain here. We have one more speaker on this panel, and then we'll come back to questioning for the two of you. Is Mr. Jabari Jones connected?
Hey, Councilwoman, I am here.
Hello, hi. Thank you. Mr. Jones, can you please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony?
Absolutely. My name is Jabari Jones. Good afternoon, Majority Leader Parker and the members of this committee. Today, I'm here to testify in strong support of Bill 220487, which, if passed, will permit the city to temporarily rehire retired employees to fill vacant positions. One thing that every business and chamber president and business association leader knows is that the Great Resignation is no myth. It's real. It's affected businesses in every industry, and it's caused essential parts of our economy to experience record labor shortages. Normal residents are feeling the effects of the resignation through record shipping delays, rising prices, and have seen their favorite products disappearing from shelves. Larger companies are struggling to combat this by boosting wages, offering remote work, and other benefits. The city of Philadelphia, whose work is more important than any individual business, has limited resources and a vast growing portfolio of priorities that cannot afford to solve this problem like the private sector. City departments from commerce to streets to the Philadelphia Police Department are experiencing high levels of vacancies. These departments and their work are crucial to the quality of life in Philadelphia neighborhoods. The work that these city employees do every day reaches every corner of our city, and when these departments are operating below capacity, the lives of ordinary Philadelphians are disrupted. Important city functions that we all rely on, from trash collection to the timely inspection and demolition of unsafe buildings, to supporting businesses with resources and ensuring that minority participation is enforced in city contracts, must be maintained. If city departments don't have the capacity to fulfill this important work, the entire city can suffer from the aftermath. Take our Philadelphia Police Department, for example, which is experiencing over 400 vacancies in a time where gun violence and crime is tearing apart every community. The vacancies have reduced the response time for officers to respond to incidents, and even non-emergency services like getting a basic police report after an auto accident can take hours. This legislation would allow the PPD to hire retired officers that could relieve officers doing administrative work, ultimately putting more cops on the streets to respond to incidents of crime faster. This bill, to me, is a common sense solution to solve the city's current hiring problem and will ensure that the essential functions of our city can be carried out without additional delays. I ask the members of this City Council committee to move this bill forward and make sure that city services can continue to be delivered without disruption. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jabari Jones, for your testimony. Have a question for both of you. And Paul, let me start with you. I'm very grateful to hear you talk about this comprehensive approach to public safety, which is not an either or, but an and one that if in fact the city of Philadelphia was employing the use of this tool that it has, which is the ability to rehire retirees, that we should, as we do, have zero tolerance for any misuse and or abuse of authority. And wherever we smell it and see it, we should rid our department of it, because it muddies the water for the men and women who are on the ground, on the front line, putting their lives on the line to protect us on a daily basis. And so when we introduce, and I want to thank both you and Jabari Jones for being with us, not in Center City. I want you to know we joshed you, Paul. Jabari, we said that day when we were in West Philadelphia that Paul Levy from the Center City District was with us in the neighborhood to affirm that this overall comprehensive approach to neighborhood safety and community policing that focused on quality of life issues, restorative justice, mental health supports and services, along with community policing was important. Paul, what is your response if someone is saying to you, I think this is an old idea, this idea of thinking about rehiring retirees. Philadelphia should just slough it through. We know it takes about 9 months to get people through the academy, but you should just slough it through, and considering the rehiring of retirees shouldn't be on the city's radar. What's your response?
Well, I think we've seen the response of people. People are incredibly upset by the gun violence. They're incredibly upset by the increase in retail theft. If we allow our police department to be diminished in its resources, we lose jobs and we lose people. I echo again what you just said. No one wants a violent or illegal action by police, but just because that happens doesn't mean we throw the entire police department out. We make, and they have made, appropriate changes, and you rebuild and you have a redefinition of public safety, and that's the direction we need to go. The pendulum swung way too far in many places to the other side, and almost every city that swung the pendulum way over is coming way back and say, wait a minute, we went too far. We need to hold to that middle ground of not either or, public safety, social service, police working in partnership. That's the model that has worked. That's the model we need to build on.
Thank you. Jabari, your response as well. This is an old idea. It's an old thought. No one will probably be interested in coming back anyway. So City of Philadelphia, we don't care if it's through legislation, although the law department said that you don't need it, or if it's through some executive action. The rehiring of retirees is not a tool that the City of Philadelphia should even be thinking about employing. What's your response?
I would say, Councilwoman, that right now the city is in a state of emergency, and I do not believe that we can afford to throw out any idea that will be able to potentially make our city safer. If we have the ability to bring in additional being able to hire retirees to potentially refill vacancies in essential city departments, we need to be using every tool in our toolbox, whether it's legislation, executive action, a combination of all of those things, to keep our city safe. All residents in every neighborhood depends on essential city services like public safety, and we need to do whatever we can to make sure that we can deliver that.
I want to thank both of you so very much. Just for the record, in the viewing public, when we think about the litany of amendments, when we learned that we had the ability to do this without legislation, for those who did not believe that the issue would in fact help the city of Philadelphia in our efforts. We talked about a potential sunset, right? You just give it a try, for a year, allow it to be up and running. Let's see how many people we recruit, how many paramedics will come back, how many EMTs would come back, how many police officers will come back, how many correctional officers would come back. And we also talked about, as a matter of transparency, and this is one of the areas where it gets kind of murky, is that for the benefit of the viewing public and to ensure that there was transparency, particularly when it comes to bringing police officers back, we talked about potentially forming sort of a review committee, right? That was not only our traditional HR department and or the police department, but how could we ensure that the head of our newly created Citizens Police Oversight Committee and or the Office of the Victims Advocate were a part of that decision making. So there is a way and a vehicle for us to do this in as a transparent manner as possible. And we are asking members of the viewing public that, again, whether through a legislative vehicle that we now know is not necessary or through executive action. If you think that this is a tool that Philadelphia should be exploring to address the crisis and the state of emergency regarding our need to fill, which was, I said 522, which was the number when we introduced this legislation, but DC Wimberly in her testimony noted that that number had increased to 544. So I wanted to note that for the record. Thank both of you for your testimony. I do not see any hands up and or questions in the chat. With that being said, Mr. Levy and Mr. Jabari Jones, thank you all so very much for being here. You can disconnect, and you will be hearing from us as we continue to advocate for any and all vehicles that are possible to address the crisis relative to our municipal employee vacancy in a myriad of Philadelphia departments. So thank you both for being here today.
Thanks for the opportunity. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
Sure. With that being said, let me formally ask for the record, are there any additional questions or comments from members of the committee for members of this panel? There being none, we will now move on to bill number 220526. And before we hear from testifiers, is Councilmember Squilla? Are you present, Councilmember Squilla? Because his bill, and I thought he wanted to make some comments.
I do not see him on here.
Okay, with that being said, Rachel, will you please call the first panel we have to testify this afternoon on bill number 220526?
Yes. Shelley Cameron and Daisy Cruz.
Shelley Cameron and Daisy Cruz, thank you both so very much for being here. Shelley, we'll begin with you. If you could just state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Chairperson Parker, and good afternoon to you and the members of the committee. My name is Shelley Cameron, Chief Executive Officer for the Division of Aviation, which manages Philadelphia International and Northeast Philadelphia airports. I am here today to testify on Bill number 220526, which would amend Chapter 9-2300 of the Philadelphia Code to expand the scope of employees covered under this chapter to include employees at the Philadelphia International Airport. While the administration supports the intent behind this legislation, we have some concerns regarding the breadth of the scope of the legislation and the potential impact to operations that may occur by requiring new contractors or subcontractors to retain the employees of a previous vendor. At a high level, it makes sense to ensure that employees from a previous vendor have every opportunity to continue their employment at PHL. Our concern is that this requirement might not best serve PHL across the board in certain job titles that are referenced in the legislation. My team is in the process of studying the impact of this ordinance to better understand how it will impact operations. We aim to learn more in the coming months. As you may be aware, PHL currently has a displaced worker policy for employees within our concession program. This policy was negotiated and approved by Unite Here. With the process of studying the impact of this ordinance just beginning, we are hopeful the bill sponsor will consider holding bill number 220526 until the fall session, so our team will be better able to understand the full scope and impact. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to testify today, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you so much, Ms. Cameron, for your testimony. Daisy Cruz, are you connected? I saw you earlier.
I'm on.
Thank you so very much, Daisy. Listen, just state your name for the record and please proceed with your testimony.
Sure. My name is Daisy Cruz, and I'm the District Director for SEIU 32BJ. Thank you for the opportunity. Chapter 9, Section 2300 of the Philadelphia Code protects contracted workers who perform a variety of services. And this is something that Council has passed in the past. but it doesn't include all of the workers. So the law mandates that if a site terminates a contract, the new contractor must hire the old contractor's employees for a temporary period of 90 days. This ensures that the employees would not be without pay, as they either prove their worth to get hired by the new contractor or search for other employment. However, the law does not protect parking workers and airport service workers. The amendment Councilmember Squilla introduced would expand existing displaced worker protections to include these essential workers. As the law is currently written, if one of the contractors these employees work for lost its service agreement to a competing contractor, the employees could suddenly be without a job through no fault of their own. That is why we implore you to vote yes on this amendment. Parking workers and airport workers are vital to functioning here in our city. They ensure that we are commuting back and forth to work, attending sporting events and concerts, and having safe flights when we're traveling. It would be unjust to let them go without income if their employer lost its contract, which is a force beyond their own control. They are essential workers and deserve to be treated as such. I thank you for this opportunity. And again, this is something that was passed in the past, and we just want to make sure that it includes airport and parking workers.
Thank you so much, Daisy Cruz, for your testimony here today on this legislation. I want to, at this time, ask any of my colleagues, do they have any questions for this panel regarding Bill number 220526? The chair recognizes Councilmember Dom.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to ask Shelley Cameron from the airport, was your request that we hold this bill?
Yes, Councilmember Dom, my request was just that we hold it until the fall session so that we have an opportunity to understand exactly what the ramifications would be. We're not at a high level, again, opposed to this. It's just we really want to make sure that we understand how this would work. I'll give you an example. What if from one contract to another, a certain type of job is no longer needed? An example might be an auditor for parking because we have gone from a high cash operation to mostly credit cards. So, we're trying to think of examples of how this would work, and we just want to make sure we have an opportunity to think that through, and we would just ask that it be delayed.
Have you not had that opportunity to have this discussion?
We haven't had enough time to have that discussion, no.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Council Member Dom. Let me try to switch back from people to chat. I don't see any other names in the chat or hands up for questions. So let me just ask for the record. Are there any additional questions or comments from members of the committee for this panel? Hearing none, Shelley and Daisy, thank you both so very much for being here today and for your comments. We are now going to move on to bill number 220493. And I do know that Councilmember Johnson is here. And so before we start calling on the first panel to testify on this bill 220493, I want to give our colleague, Councilmember Johnson, the opportunity to make some comments. Chair recognizes Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, this bill is basically a continuation of a bill that I introduced last year that will focus on providing prevailing wage and health care benefits for workers at the Philadelphia International Airport. Obviously, as we go into this particular session, this language will require any lease, rather it's a lease of American Airlines or any other company moving forward as relates to any month-to-month lease, to still follow up with the law, which basically says that American Airlines have to provide prevailing wages as well as health care benefits for the Philadelphia International Airport workers. I have been in contact with representatives from American Airlines and have gotten feedback from them. But I've always told them from day one that I will continue to listen to them as we go throughout this process, but would like to have my bill voted out of this committee today. I recognize that the Philadelphia International Airport is the people's airport. And although I appreciate the partnership we have with American Airlines, a lot of those workers have worked through the pandemic to work towards getting a prevailing wage, and really $15 an hour, to be quite frank with you, is tough to raise a family on as it is. When you talk about healthcare benefits, we're coming through a pandemic where individuals have all types of complications, and so surely the folks who stood on the front line to make sure our Philadelphia International Airport continued to operate in the middle of a pandemic should be supported. But also, American Airlines also received significant financial funding from our federal government as relates to keeping their operation going. And so we just want to make sure that everyone benefits from those funds, but most importantly, the individuals who are keeping our Philadelphia International Airport moving forward are also supported as well. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so very much, Council Member Johnson, for those comments. And let me state for the record, I'm going to have to backtrack a tad bit, because although we heard from Miss Daisy Cruz and Shelley Cameron on the first panel, that is for Bill number 220526, protection of displaced contract workers, there are two additional names. Now, I saw Manny Citron here. He was only to be here for questions, but there was another name, but I did not see you on the screen. That was Jim Tyrell. Jim Tyrell, are you still connected, and were you interested in registering any testimony on the record for Bill number 220526? I just want to make sure that we have not inadvertently, went around or did not call your name. Jim Tyrell. If in fact you are still connected, or you are still listening to this hearing and you do wish to have your testimony registered on the record, please feel free to reconnect, and we will make sure that you have the opportunity to do so before this hearing concludes. With that being said, Rachel, will you please call the first panel that we have to testify on Bill number 220493, that is the airport prevailing wage bill?
Yes, we have Manny Citron to testify on the first panel. And I believe that Jim Tyrell was accompanying Shelley Camry and ended up not testifying at the last minute because she spoke for both of them.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure it was registered for the record, and no one who was scheduled to be here today did we overlook. Good afternoon, Manny. It's good to see you. Thank you so very much. State your name for the record and feel free to proceed with your testimony.
Sure, thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Parker and members of the committee. My name is Manny Citron. I am Chief of Staff in the Philadelphia Department of Labor, and I appear before you today to testify regarding Bill number 220493. Bill number 220493 is an amendment to an ordinance which was passed last year, as Councilman Johnson just mentioned. That original bill was Bill number 210421, which established covered airport service contracts as a category of city work covered under prevailing wage requirements. It also provided for certain reporting requirements and enforcement provisions and the right for civil action in the event of a violation. Section 3 existing leases of that original legislation from last year established that the prevailing wages and other associated requirements of the ordinance will go live on an existing lease once the leasee and the city entered into a written amendment or extension of that lease. This section is a standard practice for how the city approaches amendments on both long and short-term leases. The bill in front of us today, Bill number 220493, will change this practice with respect to covered airport service contracts and covered airport service employees. If passed, it will trigger the prevailing wages and associated reporting and enforcement provisions from last year's bill immediately, regardless of whether the lease has been amended or extended. It is important that Council be aware that the airport is currently in the process of negotiating the airport use and lease agreement. This may be the largest and most complicated lease agreement that the city enters into. There are many issues and many moving parts to be resolved in these negotiations. A signed and executed use and lease agreement is critical to our airport operations because it allows PHL to engage in major expansion and renovation projects. The administration does not oppose bill number 220493. However, we are concerned that immediately applying the prevailing wage provisions at this time will disrupt the use and lease negotiations. We are hopeful that those negotiations will conclude in the near future and remove or at least alleviate the need for this bill. I look forward to answering any questions you may have. Thank you.
Manny, thank you so very much for your testimony here today. Let me ask, are there any questions or comments from members of the committee for this witness? I'm looking at the chat, and Manny, I'm trying to identify when I see hands up, because that's another feature we use, right? Going once, going twice. Okay, I don't see any hands up. With that being said, I'm going to ask Rachel to please call the second panel we have to testify here on bill number 220493.
Yes, we have Daisy Cruz is testifying again on this bill, and also Joseph Lamons.
Joseph. Daisy Cruz, are you still connected with us?
Yes, I'm still connected.
Thank you so much, Daisy. State your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Okay. My name is Daisy Cruz, and I'm the district leader at SCIU 32BJ. Good afternoon, and thank you, Madam Chair and committee, for the opportunity to testify on this bill. We here at 32BJ also hope that the city will reach a long-term lease, but it cannot be done, and I repeat, cannot be done on the backs of low-paid workers at our airport. Our members had to work through the pandemic underpaid and without affordable health care. No human being should have ever had to work under these conditions, especially not our airport workers who had to risk their lives during a global pandemic to keep our airports functioning. It is unacceptable, and we need this amendment to ensure that it never happens again. Last year, City Council voted to amend the prevailing wage ordinance, making covered airport service employees eligible for a higher minimum wage rate, a supplement to provide health insurance, and additional paid vacation and holidays. In passing this amendment, you acknowledged that airport workers deserve better pay and benefits, and for that, we thank you. But there's a potential loophole in the Philadelphia prevailing wage ordinance, as it is currently written, that it may prevent the intention of the amendment you passed last year from actually being carried out. Since prevailing wage is triggered by new leases at PHL being signed with the city after they expire at the end of this month, an airline may be able to get out of paying their workers prevailing wage if the airline continues to operate under some other arrangement that does not include a traditional lease. This amendment would expand the definition of a lease to ensure full compliance with the applicable prevailing wage for covered airport service employees, regardless of the arrangement that allows the airline to continue to operating at PHL. In other words, this amendment will ensure that these workers will receive better pay and benefits no matter what. Again, I thank you for the opportunity to letting me testify on behalf of our airport workers at the PHL.
Thank you so much, Daisy Cruz, for your testimony on this bill. Joseph Lamons, are you still connected? Are you with us?
Yes.
Thank you so much, Joseph. State your name for the record and feel free to proceed with your testimony.
Good afternoon. My name is Joseph E. Lamons, and I'm a leader and a worker at Philadelphia Airport. I'm here to testify for the bill. Hello, and thank you for having me today to testify about the amendment to the current prevailing wage bill. that was set to go into effect July 1st. That would give me and my coworkers wage increases, employer paid health care, and paid time off. Currently, I make just $14.40 an hour at the Philadelphia airport as a cabin cleaner. As my coworkers and I have said time and time again, no airport would run without us doing all of the work on the ground. Airlines focus on making a profit, but we focus on making sure that airports are clean, safe, and running on time. And yet, for all that we do for airports and airlines, they are now trying to delay the agreement of a lease and therefore delaying us, the workers, the wages and benefits guaranteed through the prevailing wage bill that this council has already passed. I am in dire straits, and so is almost everyone that I work with. I cannot afford to live on what I make, and I cannot afford to pay out of pocket for my health care. Right now, I am struggling to find a place to live where I can afford the rent. This amendment is essential because it will ensure that no matter what the airports and airlines do with their lease regulation negotiations, we, the workers, are still taken care of and given what was promised to us in the original prevailing wage legislation. I am counting on the prevailing wage to go into effect July 1st, so that my pay increases, but also that I can finally go to the doctor and address the issues that I have been putting off for so long. If I had to put this off again, I would truly be crushed. I am taking the time to speak here today because this is not just for me. It is about our whole community of workers. We all deserve the dignity and respect that comes with being paid and a living wage and being provided the life-saving benefit of employer paid health insurance. Thank you all again for your time.
Thank you so very much, Joseph, for your testimony. Let me state for the record that we have written testimony from Obra Conodo on behalf of American Airlines. We also have testimony from a Benjamin McMillan, also from 32BJ, and we will have that testimony applied to the record. With that being said, are there any questions for members of this panel? And I just want to ask for the record, is the bill sponsor who has been deputized by Council President Clark to assist with quorum and voting here today? Councilmember Johnson, are you still connected with us, Councilmember Johnson?
Yes, I'm connected.
Okay, Councilmember Johnson, for the record, I do want to note that you have been appointed as a member of the committee for the purpose of our vote on both of these issues here today.
I don't have any script and I'm not in City Hall. Okay.
Okay, okay. I think I also hear Councilmember Brian O'Neill is here.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you so very much. Chair recognizes that Councilmember Brian O'Neill is present. So Councilmember Johnson, thank you so very much for almost coming to the rescue. But I think we will be fine without your vote, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you. You have a good day. Thank you.
Okay, with that being said, I want to ask for the record again. Are there any questions or comments from members of the committee for this panel? Hearing none. I also want to make sure, I need to state this for the record. Are there any final questions or comments from members of this committee for anyone who testified today on behalf of any of the bills that were heard? There being no further questions from members of the committee and no other witnesses. No other witnesses here to testify for any of the bills. That's 220487, 220526, and 220493. Okay, no further questions from members, no other witnesses to testify on bill numbers that I just referenced, 220487, 220526, and 220493. I will ask if there is anyone else present in this hearing whose name we failed to call that wishes to offer testimony on any of the bills or the resolution being considered. Hearing none, I want to thank all of our witnesses for their participation today. We value your opinions. We will now recess the public hearing and go into a public meeting to consider the action to be taken on bill numbers 220526 and 220493. We will again note for the record that bill number, upon advice and guidance from the City of Philadelphia's Law Department, bill number 220487 is being held in committee because legislative action for the rehiring of retirees in the City of Philadelphia is not something that needs legislative approval in order to be enacted. With that being said, we will now convene our public meeting.
Okay, I'll be fine.
The chair recognizes Council Member Gilmore Richardson for a motion.
Councilwoman, I believe we need to go through the attendance again. Call the roll.
Okay, Rachel, will you please call the roll? Members who are in attendance, please say present and a few other names when your name is called so that your image will be displayed on screen.
Vice Chair Brian O'Neill.
Present.
Councilmember Alan Dom.
Present. Thank you.
And Councilmember Gilmore Richardson.
Present.
And thank you, Councilmember Gilmore Richardson, for doing the script.
Thank you, Rachel. So we now have our quorum and we will go into our public meeting. The chair recognizes Councilmember Gilmore Richardson for a motion on bill number 220526.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that bill number 220526 be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further move that the rules of council be suspended to permit first reading of this bill at the next session of council.
Second.
The chair notes for the record that Councilmember O'Neill seconds that motion. It has been moved and properly seconded that bill number 220526 be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further move that the rules of council be suspended to permit first reading of this bill at the next session of council. All those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? The ayes have it, and that motion carries. The chair again recognizes Councilmember Gilmore Richardson for a motion on bill number 220493.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that bill number 220493 be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further move that the rules of council be suspended to permit first reading of this bill at the next session of council.
Second.
The chair notes for the record that Councilmember Brian O'Neill seconds the motion. It has been moved and properly seconded that Bill number 220493 be reported from this committee with the favorable recommendation, and further move that the rules of council be suspended to permit first reading of this bill at the next session of council. All those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the ayes have it, and the motion carries. That will conclude this hearing. It concludes the business of the Committee on Labor and Civil Service for today. This public hearing is recessed to the call of the chair. Thank you to my colleagues, all of the witnesses who testified here today, and the viewing public. Have a good day.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.